There are places in this world where the veil between realities wears thin, places where the echoes of past tragedies linger, staining the very ground with sorrow and dread. Hollow Grove Farm is one such place. On October 21, 2021, authorities in Bell County, Kentucky responded to a distress call from a neighboring farmer. He reported seeing strange lights and hearing disturbing noises emanating from Hollow Grove Farm. The house was eerily undisturbed, yet completely empty. The Martins had vanished without a trace. Jack and Rachel Martin were city dwellers yearning for a simpler life. Hollow Grove Farm, with its rolling hills and charming, if somewhat dilapidated farmhouse, seemed like the answer to their prayers. They were blissfully unaware of the darkness that had seeped into the very foundation of their new home. The Martins had stumbled into a place where the harvest was always bountiful, but the price... Hollow Grove Farm. The property was shrouded in an unsettling stillness, as if the very air held its breath, wary of disturbing whatever slumbered beneath the surface. The locals knew better than to venture near the old farmhouse. The Martins, newcomers to the area, were oblivious to the dark history that clung to Hollow Grove like a persistent fog. The house was unnaturally quiet. The only sounds were the creaking of the floorboards beneath their feet and the distant rustling of leaves outside, sounding for all the world like whispered warnings carried on the wind. As the Martins unpacked their belongings, a growing sense of unease settled upon them. Unexplained noises, shadows that seemed to shift and coalesce in the corners of their vision, and a pervasive feeling of coldness that permeated the very walls of the house. As darkness descended upon Hollow Grove Farm, so too did the true nature of the evil that lurked within its boundaries. Max, the youngest of the Martins, was the first to succumb. He began waking in the dead of night, his eyes wide with terror, claiming to hear voices calling his name from the fields beyond the house. The Martins, their initial excitement at their new life quickly turning to dread, were beginning to realize that they had stumbled into something far more sinister than they could have ever imagined. Lily's once vibrant drawings filled with sunshine and rainbows took on a disturbing new theme. A solitary figure, tall and skeletal, began to appear with increasing frequency. Max's nightmares intensified. He would wake up screaming, his tiny body drenched in sweat, muttering about a lady in the corn who spoke to him in whispers. Rachel and Jack, their initial amusement at their children's overactive imaginations quickly fading, began to feel a growing sense of unease. The silence of Hollow Grove Farm was deceptive. The grandfather clock in the hallway, long since stopped, suddenly sprang to life at precisely 3:13 a.m. every morning, its chimes echoing through the empty house like the tolling of a funeral bell. Rachel found herself plagued by a persistent feeling of being watched, as if unseen eyes followed her every move. She would catch fleeting glimpses of movement in the periphery of her vision, shadows that darted behind furniture or disappeared around corners just as quickly as they appeared. Faint whispers, just on the edge of hearing, that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the house itself. One evening, as Jack was unpacking boxes in the pantry, he stumbled upon something that sent a chill down his spine. Hidden behind a stack of shelves, concealed beneath layers of peeling wallpaper, was a door. The wood of the door was old, much older than the rest of the house, and stained a deep, almost black brown. There were strange carvings etched into the surface, crude symbols that seemed to writhe and pulsate under Jack's touch. Rachel, her intuition screaming at her to flee, begged Jack to leave the door undisturbed, but a strange compulsion drew him to it, a morbid curiosity that he couldn't shake. As the realization of their predicament dawned on them, a primal fear gripped the Martins. They were trapped, ensnared in a web of terror they never could have imagined. Their attempts to escape were met with an unsettling and inexplicable resistance. Roads that appeared on no map led them in endless circles, their GPS spinning uselessly, their calls for help met with static and a chilling silence. The outside world, once a source of comfort and security, was now a distant memory, walled off by an unseen force that held them captive. Desperate for answers, Jack and Rachel began searching for clues, for any explanation for the horrors that were unfolding around them. Their search led them to a hidden compartment in the chimney, where they discovered a diary, its pages filled with the frantic scribblings of a soul long gone. The diary belonged to a man named Elias Crowder, the original owner of Hollow Grove Farm. Crowder wrote of an ancient entity, a being of immense power and insatiable hunger, known only as the Seedmen. As Rachel read Crowder's chilling words, a horrifying realization dawned on them. Driven by a desperate hope of ending the cycle of horror, Jack, Rachel and Lily descended into the bowels of the farmhouse, following the spiral staircase deeper into the earth. The air grew colder with each step, as if they were descending into the very heart of the darkness that had claimed their home. The chamber was a charnel house, a testament to the countless souls that had been sacrificed to the Seedmen over the centuries. Bones of men, women, and children lay scattered across the dirt floor, arranged in strange, spiral patterns that seemed to writhe and pulsate in the flickering lamplight. And then they saw it. News of the Martins' disappearance spread like wildfire through the small community surrounding Hollow Grove Farm. The locals, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and grim satisfaction, whispered amongst themselves, their voices hushed, their eyes darting nervously towards the tree line that marked the boundary of the cursed property. Stories whispered around campfires, tales passed down from parent to child, spoke of a darkness that predated human memory, a hunger that could never be sated. They knew that the Martins were not the first to vanish from Hollow Grove Farm. As I delved deeper into the mystery of Hollow Grove Farm, I uncovered a disturbing pattern of disappearances, each one shrouded in secrecy, each one quickly swept under the rug by the authorities. Every 30 years, like clockwork, a family would vanish from Hollow Grove. No signs of a struggle, no forced entry, no ransom demands. The police investigations, if you could call them that, were always cursory, half-hearted affairs. The disappearances were always ruled as missing persons cases, the families dismissed as having simply run away or met with some tragic but ultimately explainable fate. My research led me to the local library, where I discovered a collection of folklore and local history. Amongst the brittle pages and faded ink, I found references to the Seedman, the entity that Elias Crowder had written about in his diary. He was real, and his roots ran deep into the soil of Hollow Grove. The Seedman, according to local legend, was not a creature of flesh and blood, but something far older, far more insidious. He craved life force, the energy of living things, and he would stop at nothing to satisfy his unending hunger. The cellar door, hidden for decades, had yielded to Jack's desperate curiosity. A crude set of stairs, hewn from dirt and timber, spiraled down into the earth. Each step carried the Martins further from the familiar, further into the grip of Hollow Grove's dark history. The air grew colder as they descended, the oppressive silence broken only by the sound of their own breathing and the frantic thumping of their hearts. The chamber was a nightmare, a charnel house of forgotten rituals and unspeakable sacrifices. The walls, damp and crumbling, were adorned with strange symbols etched into the stone, their meaning lost to time but their power undeniable. The air hummed with a strange energy, a palpable sense of power that sent shivers down their spines. It felt ancient, primal, and utterly alien. This was a place where the natural order had been subverted, where the boundaries between life and death were blurred, and where the darkness held sway. The bones, bleached white by time and exposure, were arranged in intricate patterns that spiraled outwards from the center of the room. They were not the random remnants of death, but carefully placed offerings, evidence of a ritualistic practice that spanned generations, a testament to the dark legacy of Hollow Grove Farm. And then they saw it. Standing at the far end of the chamber, bathed in the eerie glow of the single flickering candle, was a figure. It wasn't human, not entirely, but something else, something ancient and monstrous. Its body was a grotesque parody of the human form, a twisted mockery of life itself. Twisted branches served as limbs, their ends sharpened to wicked points. A human skull, its empty sockets staring out blindly, served as its head, its jawbone permanently agape in a silent scream. This was no mere effigy, no simple representation of some forgotten deity. This was something else, something far older, far more primal. This was the embodiment of the darkness that had claimed Hollow Grove Farm, the heart of the harvest, the seedman. And then, Max moved. As if in a trance, he walked towards the monstrous figure, his small hand outstretched, his face devoid of fear. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through their bones as if the very earth itself was awakening. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the chamber, seeming to emanate from the very walls themselves. It was not a language they recognized, but its meaning was clear. This was a voice of power, of hunger, of ancient and terrible purpose. Max, his voice transformed, filled with an unnatural maturity, spoke, but the words were not his own. "The harvest is ready," he intoned, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The seedman calls for his due." In that moment, the Martins knew they were trapped, not just within the confines of the chamber, but within the grasp of something far older, far more powerful than they could have ever imagined. They had stumbled into the heart of a nightmare, and there was no waking up. The events following their descent into the ritual chamber remain shrouded in mystery. The Martins' accounts, fragmented and contradictory, offer little clarity. They speak of a blinding light, a cacophony of sound, and then silence. They found themselves back in their truck, the engine running, the road stretching out before them like a promise of escape. Lily, seemingly unharmed, was calm, a disturbing serenity settling over her youthful features. She spoke of the cornfield, of a voice that soothed her fears, of a darkness that promised peace. Hope, fragile and fleeting, flickered in their hearts. Had they escaped the clutches of Hollow Grove Farm? Had they somehow appeased the hunger that dwelt beneath its soil? Or were they merely pawns in a game far older, far more sinister than they could comprehend? Seeking refuge, a sanctuary from the unseen forces that pursued them, the Martins stopped for the night at a nondescript motel on the outskirts of a nameless town. They ate their meal in silence, each bite heavy with unspoken fear, their laughter replaced by a chilling quietude. As Jack washed away the grime and exhaustion of their journey, he noticed something unsettling. The motel room, once a haven of anonymity, began to shift, its familiar features distorting, the floral wallpaper morphing into the same grotesque patterns that adorn the walls of the ritual chamber beneath Hollow Grove Farm. The static from the television resolved into a cacophony of whispers, the voices of countless souls, their tones filled with a chilling blend of sorrow and malice. They spoke of the seedman, of his insatiable hunger, of the price that must be paid for disturbing the balance. Panic surged through them, a tidal wave of terror that shattered their fragile hope. The motel room, their sanctuary, had become a prison, its walls closing in, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. The wallpaper peeled away, revealing the rough-hewn timbers of the farmhouse walls. The flickering neon sign outside transformed into the leering skull of the seedman, its empty sockets burning with an infernal light. They had never left. The seedman, his power absolute, had toyed with them, granting them a taste of freedom only to rip it away, their hope crushed beneath the weight of his ancient hunger. The Martins had become one with Hollow Grove Farm, their lives forfeit, their souls ensnared in the endless cycle of the harvest. Their fate, A chilling reminder that some places hold a darkness that can never be outrun, a hunger that can never be sated. The disappearance of the Martins sent shockwaves through Bell County, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of their peaceful community. But as the weeks turned into months, the initial horror gave way to a weary acceptance. Life, as it always does, went on. Hollow Grove Farm stood vacant, a silent sentinel overlooking the rolling countryside. The authorities, their investigation inconclusive, had no answers, no explanation for the fate of the Martins. The case, like those that had preceded it, was quietly swept under the rug, added to the growing pile of unsolved mysteries that haunted the history of Bell County. The locals, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and resignation, avoided the property. They whispered tales of strange lights seen flickering in the windows at night, of voices carried on the wind, of a palpable sense of dread that clung to the very air surrounding the farmhouse. The crows, however, seemed drawn to the property, their numbers swelling with each passing season. They perched on the roof, their black eyes watching, waiting, as if guarding a secret too terrible to comprehend. 3 years passed. 3 years of eerie silence and unsettling stillness. Then, on a bright spring morning, a new family arrived at Hollow Grove Farm, their faces filled with the promise of a fresh start, oblivious to the darkness that lay dormant beneath the surface of their new home. The "For Sale" sign had been replaced, the faded paint covered with a fresh coat of cheerful yellow. The windows, once boarded up, sparkled in the sunlight. The laughter of children, a sound absent for far too long, once again echoed through the halls of Hollow Grove Farm. The new owners, eager to make the house their own, had embarked on a series of renovations. Walls were torn down, floors were refinished, the musty scent of decay replaced with the fresh aroma of paint and new carpet. But some stains, it seems, run deeper than paint and plaster can reach. The darkness that had claimed Hollow Grove Farm was patient. It had waited, slumbering beneath the surface, biding its time. And now, with the arrival of a new family, a new generation ripe for the harvest, the cycle was poised to begin anew. The echoes of the past lingered, whispers in the wind shadows that danced at the edge of vision. The land remembered, the corn remembered, and the seed man, his hunger never truly satiated, waited patiently beneath the fertile soil of Hollow Grove Farm, his roots entwined with the fate of those who dared to call it home. The cycle continues, a never-ending loop of hope and despair, of life given and taken, a chilling reminder that some places hold a darkness that can never truly be extinguished, a hunger that can never be satisfied. The harvest is coming, and this time it will be bountiful.